Hey, man.
Hey, man.
Cool. Have you ever heard of the late Bronze Age collapse?
The what?
The late Bronze Age collapse.
Yeah. Bronze Age collapse?
Yeah.
Yeah, when he was alive. It was a really great time. But the late Bronze Age collapse. What a good fellow.
You're saying there's a dude named Bronze Age collapse.
And he's died.
And he's late.
Yeah. The late Bronze Age collapse.
I mean, okay. I see where you're going with that.
Sure.
No, that's wrong.
All right. I don't know. Some of these jokes are good, and some of them are just real bad.
Should we do ASMR?
So you're saying there are people who live under the ocean, and the water just slowly went down, and all of a sudden, their heads were just out of the water. I'll give you $100 cash right now if you can tell me what it stands for. You and I could single-handedly win the Civil War if we went back in time with current weapons. Things I learned last night.
So the late Bronze Age collapse, here's the thing about this. Speaking of here's the thing. Hold on, I need to pull up a review.
You're talking about that podcast review that was like, I'll support on Patreon if Tim limits Here's the Thing to 3 times. So you already said it twice, so I swear, don't say it again.
It says
don't even read it. Don't even read it. That'll count.
Here's the thing. I'm not going to stop saying here's the thing.
Well, now we're not going to get that person to support us on Patreon.
I got to be honest. The fact that you brought it up has made me want to say it very more. Very more. So anyways, Kelsey, I just want you to know.
Over. Let's start over. I don't care about this person.
Here's the thing, Kelsey. I personally became a patron in your place, so that way I can continue to say, here's the thing. And not have to worry about the cost.
You're paying the $5 a month.
I'm paying the $5 a month.
So
in your
you
place,
can have the freedom to say,
here's the thing as much as I want. Anyways. So yeah, the late Bronze Age collapse.
All right.
So this is a long time ago.
Okay.
There was a thing called the Bronze Age.
Sure.
And so it was a period in history that was pretty strange because it was pretty successful.
Everyone made stuff with bronze. Everything was bronze.
Not really.
Bronze toilets.
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, they made a lot of like weapons and stuff out of bronze, I think. I don't know a lot about the Bronze Age. I just know about it falling apart.
Oh.
But like, what I do know is there was this region in the Mediterranean Sea, like around the not in the Mediterranean, around the Mediterranean, where there was a bunch of these nations that were just ridiculously successful nations who were very advanced, especially compared to the world following the collapse. So, for example, there was Egypt. Egypt was a part of there. They had airplanes then.
No, they didn't.
No, but Egypt, all these nations, they had.
Do you subscribe to the theory that Egypt was more technologically advanced than we are?
I don't know if I would say I subscribe. I say I see a possible world, but I don't think I see enough evidence to believe it. You know, but I could see it. What I would say I could see. What I think is more likely is that there was something before Egypt that was more technologically advanced, and they're kind of the remnant that like their quote unquote sages had like passed down knowledge to be able to do some stuff that everyone else in the world couldn't do because the people before them were smarter than them. But they all died in the Ice Age or the Flood or something. I don't know.
Okay. So we're talking about what time period are we talking about?
So this is 1200 between 1200 and 1150 BC.
That's a pretty narrow window there. 50 years?
Yeah, they know exactly when this happened. So the Bronze Age was from 3000 BCE to 1200 BCE. And
I'll give you $100 cash right now if you can tell me what it stands for.
Before Common Era.
Mm-mm.
Yes.
No.
What do you think it means?
Before Christ incarnate.
Not even how you spell incarnate.
They didn't know back then.
They hadn't come up with the letter I yet.
What was? Isn't it before Christ and after death? Is what people kept saying it was.
That's what they said it was. That wasn't right then either.
I know.
I mean, before Christ, yes, but after death is not correct either.
What is after death? Do you know?
Where are you going?
Are you worried about what's after death? BetterHelp.com. You're in love.
There was the Egyptians,
Yeah.
the Assyrians, the Hittites, the Macedonians,
Okay.
which were in Greece. I should probably say where these people are. The Egypts were in Egypt.
The Egypts were in Egypt.
The Hittites were in Hittite. The Assyrians were in Assyrians. No, okay, so the Hittites were in an area called Anatolia, which is just Turkey. The Assyrians were next to that, like to the right of that.
Sure.
And the Macedonians were in Greece. There's Cyprus, which was on the island of Cyprus. Then there was the Levant, which is like a collection of smaller states.
The Levant?
Yeah.
That's so cool. That sounds like a really hip bar. That sounds like
It does.
The Levant.
Yeah, welcome to the Levant.
It's like, yeah. It's a cocktail bar.
Yeah, it does.
It's very cool.
And that was like a collection of a bunch of smaller like cities and states.
Okay.
In the Mesopotamian era.
Sure.
And then there was Egypt. And then a couple smaller other players, but those are the big ones.
Egypt, famous for their big bass pros.
Okay. So they each of these nations was honestly pretty. This whole civilization here was very advanced, especially for the era of time that they were in.
Okay.
They all had writing. They all had arts and crafts. They all had decent like infrastructure, so like roads, some rudimentary like waterworks.
Okay.
And then they had decent architecture, and they had they were technologically advanced in terms of like warfare.
Well, the architecture was left over from a previous society.
It was the Tartarians.
Yes.
Long story short, they were technologically advanced
please
compared
make it
to.
short. Please make your long story shorter.
They were pretty technologically advanced compared to
Yeah. Us.
everything else. Honestly, up until the classical era,
Sure.
historians would say this was the best era of human history to live in. Up until the classical era.
What?
Because it was so advanced and there was so much quote unquote luxury and a decent level of peace.
What do you
There
think
was
they
war
would
and
say that
stuff.
the current best time to live in is?
What the future?
Here and now, baby. The future?
The future.
Like, yeah, right now it's kind of bad.
We're pretty far away from.
But we don't want to go back to where we were. We're in this weird limbo.
Worse before.
You know what it's like? It's like when you break up with a girl for a little while, but you still like want to get together in the future, but like right now it's not the right time,
Yep,
you know?
Yep.
And it's like I'm immature and she's dumb, you know?
And so you're like ships in the night.
Yeah, it's like the timing wasn't right.
So
But then she starts dating some other dude, right? Like going on, like not like a real relationship, not like a good like, you know, it's not gonna work out with them.
Yeah.
But it's just like they're
But they're
flirting,
just-
you know,
yeah.
and they go out and they go get ice cream together, and you're just at home playing Xbox in your garage, you know, and you're like, man, I really wish that I didn't mess that up, you know. You just yearn for what you had,
Yeah.
you know, and they're like living in a limbo is what I'm saying. They're kind of like well, historians would say we're living in a limbo.
we're living in a limbo.
Yeah, where they're like, we don't want, like, we're too far past where that would be like good life.
Yeah.
But we're not yet to the good life.
Yeah. We're in the in between, and they were not. They were in a great time to be alive.
For what they were, yeah.
For when they were. And one of the most significant things about the society is it was a globalized society. And I put that in quotes because they didn't understand how big the world was yet.
But they were connected with the other countries around them.
Yeah, and they had trade networks, and they relied upon each other. So, for example, the Levant, all the nations in there, they had a lot of food with really fertile land, and so they could eat a lot. But they didn't have access to a lot of bronze or really many other materials in general.
Okay.
And so
they had to trade.
They traded all their food for materials.
Sure.
Trade's been around forever. But in this era, what was significant is it was a very early era of time where people literally relied on every other nation to supply their needs, and it was a trade network, just like we have today, where all your stuff comes from somewhere else. And so that was the world that they lived in that era. What's peculiar is in 1200, between 1200 and 1150 BC, 50 years, a single generation, the entire thing collapsed. It just fell apart. And the only nations to make it out of it were Egypt and Assyria, and a couple of smaller cities, but it was different.
When you say make it out of it, what does that mean? Like they all fell up, like they literally just aren't nations
Yeah, they
anymore?
got wiped from the face of the earth. And so Egypt
By
and
who?
Assyria, we'll find out. Egypt and Assyria, what are you looking at me like that for?
Who wiped them out, Tim? We'll find
there's
out.
theories.
Okay.
So Egypt and Assyria, they survived, but they were like fractured. You know, like they barely made it out of there alive. Everybody else,
Egypt was like, we lost our Israelites. Where did they go?
And here's what's crazy. Nobody knows exactly what happened. There's a lot of theories.
In a 50-year window,
There's
this
a 50-year window.
established. How long had they been living in good trade systems and all that stuff?
About 1,800 years.
Oh, wow.
So this was a very long period of a very successful
and fruitfulness.
society. Yeah. Of relative peace. There were wars and stuff like that.
Yeah, always.
But it wasn't, there was nothing crazy.
And then within 50 years, it all just falls apart.
Yeah, it all collapses. The prevailing theory for the longest time was the Sea Peoples. Have you heard of them?
The what?
The Sea Peoples. Have you heard of this?
No.
So this is an interesting thing where a lot of texts from these different nations talk about these Sea Peoples, and that's what they call them because they didn't know.
They didn't know that the world was bigger.
Well, they didn't know where they were coming from. These people literally just rose up out of the sea. Well, they probably.
I mean, they boated in.
They probably boated in. Probably. It doesn't explicitly say that though. It says they came from the sea.
Okay.
No, so these Sea Peoples came in, and they were just destroying all these cities from these massive empires, which was very peculiar and has kind of stumped historians for a long time because these societies, they were superpowers. They were the superpowers of the day, and they were more technologically advanced than anything else in the world. They were masters of the chariot.
What existed outside of the Mediterranean Sea at that point?
Well, Africa, Asia.
I mean,
North
like,
America.
what do we have established societies in that era?
There are, but there's not like here's the deal. Nobody cared to research them because this is Western history, and they only care about stuff that leads to America.
Got it.
No, so there was China. China had their dynasties coming together.
Yeah.
There was some northern European stuff in like Russia, and then there was all stuff throughout Europe.
But they were probably just as technologically advanced.
No, nothing compared to the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean was the superpower of the world. There was all these other civilizations, and they had a society that was forming, but it was nothing like this because they were so interconnected and they had these trade routes, so they were able to develop further than anyone else.
So they're going to blame the Sea Peoples for their falling apart.
Well, yeah. So that was the idea: is that these Sea Peoples, they don't know who they are or where they came from.
The sea,
but yeah. But something about them, they had a technological edge over all of the superpowers of the day, and they managed to come in and just wipe them out. And the evidence we have of this is we have a shocking amount
of just blue people who are dripping wet.
There's a shocking amount of cities from that time period that were destroyed in that time period and were never rebuilt.
And they have signs that say, beware the Sea Peoples.
Beware the Sea People. No, there's letters. Hey, thanks for checking out this episode. If you like our show, make sure to leave a podcast review in whatever platform you use, or if you're on YouTube, drop a comment. If you want to listen to another episode, my favorite right now is Jose Canseco. It's this guy in the MLB who really brought steroids mainstream for the sport and did a lot of other just absolutely insane stuff. And there might be a little bit of aliens in it. So check that episode out. It's one of my favorites. But thanks for being here. So the first and like the biggest one we get is from a town called Ugarit. Creative name. And it was a letter to another king. It's in here somewhere. I got to find the note. It was a letter to another king basically saying, okay, here he says, he said the enemy's, they did say ships. The enemy's ships came here. So yeah, most likely from the boats. And they did evil things in my country. So here's another interesting weird thing before we go on. These kings in these nations called the kings in other nations their father. I don't know why. It was a weird cultural thing. So he's talking to this other king and he's calling him his father. And so then he says, does not my father know that the troops and chariots are in the land of Hatti, and all my ships are in the land of Luca? Thus the country is abandoned to itself. May my father know it. The 7 ships of my enemy, they came here to inflict much damage upon us. Basically, he was asking this other king to be like, hey, come help us, because all my army's on the other side of my nation, and you're closer. I need you to come save this city.
And by the time the letter gets to him...
Well, the letter never left. They found the letter in that city.
Wow.
So there's all these destroyed cities. And so the theory was something happened with these sea peoples. Some people believe they discovered iron and they started making iron weapons.
And the bronze couldn't hold up.
Bronze wasn't good enough.
Yeah, it goes bronze, iron, steel.
Steel, yeah.
Adamant.
Adamant?
No, not adamant.
What are you saying?
Admiral? What is it?
Silver, gold, platinum, computers.
Rune.
Oh, are you looking
Mithril.
RuneScape? RuneScape. All right,
man, there's mithril. On. There's what was it? Addy. What is it? Anyway, yeah, I know weapons.
No, so
I know medieval times.
Here's the thing. Here's what doesn't make sense about this. These people, they had chariots, which were like the tanks of the day. And even if the sea peoples managed to get iron swords,
sure,
they still shouldn't have been a match for a nation that had thousands of chariots. And we
don't know they had thousands of chariots. They could have written that. They'd be like, we have thousands of chariots.
We found like wheels and stuff, like all their chariot stuffs.
Wow,
they're fake. They're models.
Well, I mean, that answers it, doesn't it?
And so what's phenomenal is whoever these sea peoples are, they went through, they wiped out all these cities, and 2 things didn't happen. One, the sea peoples didn't take over the city like most empires that wiped.
So they just left it.
They just left it. They just came in, killed everybody, and left, which is very strange. And then 2, there must have been no survivors, or the survivors got taken prisoner or ran or whatever because no one rebuilt. Yeah. And so they were literally wiped out, and it was hundreds of cities all over the Mediterranean, and all these different superpower nations just disappeared all at once.
Right.
To the point that these nations literally fell and disappeared off the face of the earth. And these quote unquote sea peoples disappeared after this.
So they destroyed how many?
Hundreds. I don't know how many cities, but there's, I think, 7 or 8 nations that would be considered like superpowers that all got wiped out from this event, whatever this event was.
Okay.
And so the prevailing theory for a long time was that these sea peoples, they came in, they killed everybody, and they just left.
Took care of that.
Got rid of you guys. And so recently...
But they didn't steal all the riches and stuff?
Well, I mean, stuff probably got stolen.
Sure.
But nobody knows where it went. Like, where did it go? You would think they would either take those cities or take stuff back to their cities, but we have no idea where they came from, what their purpose was, or where they went after all this happened. They just disappeared.
So historians are looking at the sea peoples, and they're like, where did you come from? Where did you go?
Can I cut you off? Are you going to try to finish this joke, or...
There's no joke. I was trying to make sure I knew where we were on the episode here.
Okay, cool. So recent historians have been like, maybe this is not, maybe the sea peoples were not the reason for the collapse.
Yeah.
Maybe they were more of symptom of a greater problem. And so they started looking at the rest of the situation in the world at the time.
Okay.
And there are now about I don't know how many there are, a handful of possibilities, of possible conclusions. It looks like there's 6 theories of what started this collapse.
Yeah.
And then led to almost like a domino effect of one of these pins fell, and then it led to all these other things beginning to fall apart.
I understand how dominoes works.
Yeah, do you need me to? I can set some up if you want me to. We can watch them fall.
It's not going to be great for the audio listener. But I see you got them set up. So go ahead and knock them over. That was what you did? That was your domino noise?
What would be your domino noise?
Well, it starts closer to the mic, right? So
Yeah, you're right. I think it would be a little bit more of like a roll, like a. That might have been a pretty good one. Should we do ASMR? Okay, this is okay. So here's some of the.
So the sea people. Sometimes Tim in our office will listen to ASMR. So the sea people came over.
It helps me focus.
And they murdered everybody. Have you ever whispered to your Echo devices? It's terrifying.
Yeah, because she whispers back, doesn't she?
Yeah, the first time, but you don't realize that. Have you ever done that? Where you're like you're tired and you're like Echo, set an alarm for 8 a.m. and she'll go, it sounds like you've whispered to me. Next time you whisper, I'll whisper back. And it's terrifying. It is, because the lights are off. It is terrifying.
It's the I'll whisper back.
And I can never prove it to anybody because I've already done it. I've already set up the Echo.
Yikes.
Do it. If you got an Echo, leave the lights on though. She'll possess you.
Yeah.
Right?
You'll never
if you
come
get
out
possessed by
alive.
Alexa, it's over for you.
Okay, so here's some of the theories. The first one is volcanoes.
Obviously.
Most likely, there was a volcano in
somewhere
Scotland
Okay.
called Hekla, and it erupted in February 2020. Just kidding, that's wrong. It erupted at the beginning of.
Wow, it erupted in February 2020? And then it set in motion just the worst year.
Actually, oh no, February 2000.
Oh. Still.
It erupted in what year is this? About 20 years before the Bronze Age collapse.
Okay.
And this eruption was classified as a 5, an EF5 eruption.
Okay.
I don't know what the scale is, but it's a 5 on the eruption scale. And it was significant enough where it spewed enough ash and, I don't know, stuff into the sky. Smoke, if you will, into the sky worldwide that it changed the climate for 18 years. The temperature dropped for 18 years.
Wow. Sounds like that's what we need to happen again. Guys, I've got a solution to global warming.
I did a lot of research.
If we just take all the salmon and we shove it in this volcano, it's got to create enough pressure. 250 million salmon shoved down a volcano. It'll create enough pressure. And also, plus side, when it erupts, it'll cook all the salmon, right? So we just have salmon for everybody.
It's the fish cano.
Fish cano? Bro, that's a movie we got to make right now. You've seen Sharknado. This fall, Fish Cano. In a theater near you.
So this eruption changed the climate worldwide.
Sure.
And I tried to figure it out exactly what that meant, that 18 years. And there's a scale of it either changed the temperature of by about 2 degrees Celsius, like dipped it by about 2 degrees Celsius for those 18 years, or the average temperature was below zero for 18 years, which is quite a range.
I was going to say, that seems pretty dramatic.
That's quite a range. So I checked Krakatoa, which Krakatoa was a similar eruption. It was a 6 on the scale. So
I thought Krakatoa was a website that verified things. I thought you were like, so I checked Krakatoa, right? And Krakatoa says, and I was like, I've never heard of Krakatoa before.
Krakatoa was another big eruption, just by near Australia.
Just by close to it.
Near Australia. And I want to say the early 1800s.
Sure.
And so we have better records of that. And that was peculiar because there was a period for, I want to say it was 7 or 8 years, where the sky was a different color after that. It was such a severe, and I shouldn't say it was a different color, but the sunsets were oranger.
Okay.
I don't know. It was darker or something. I don't know. It had a severe effect on the world.
Sure.
And so the theory goes that this eruption caused a famine in Europe.
Okay.
And so the Europeans, they all traveled down into the Mediterranean to get food from the superpowers. This influx of refugees in all these nations meant...
Overwhelmed them.
Yeah, they did not have enough food for everybody, which led to a new crisis of nations like the nations in the Levant, where their primary export was the food.
Right.
They now couldn't export, so they couldn't get all the other materials they needed for the
rest of society. Because they couldn't export enough.
Yeah, because they didn't have enough to maintain all the refugees.
Got it.
And so it started to kind of cripple each of these nations because they couldn't keep up with the amount of food that they had, because they were... What was very interesting was these societies had these storehouses, and they had like really sophisticated ledgers keeping track of how much food that they needed throughout to get through all the winters and even extended famines, so they could withstand those sorts of things. Well, when there was this influx of people, it messed up that calculation, and so then they ran out of food really quickly.
Okay.
And so as this theory goes, is it put the whole area into this state of a very thin line, close to a collapse.
Okay.
And then everybody who didn't travel in to become a refugee started getting desperate. And those are the sea peoples. They got boats and they came in and were basically like, hey, give us food or we kill you.
And they were like, we don't have any food.
And then they killed them.
They were like, if there's one thing, we're true to our word.
Their
phrase was, see? That's good. That was all right. That was a good joke.
And these people groups were all... It was a disjointed and fractured group.
So we're still on volcano theory right now.
Yeah. And because this was a disjointed and fractured group, that's why they weren't capturing the cities. They were just trying to get food and survive, and then we're going on to the next city to get the food and survive.
To survive. Got it.
And the reason why these nations couldn't defend themselves against these people is...
Because they're malnourished themselves.
There's that, but there's also this idea that the lack of trade
destabilized.
was bad for the economy.
Yeah.
And especially
people
the
were
military.
Fighting inflation. Gas prices were high.
Especially the military was very expensive in these nations to train and maintain all their different chariots and armors and whatever they had.
Sure.
And so they weren't in a state where they were ready to defend themselves like they normally would have been. They're a little bit weaker and more open to attack. Is the theory. And so it was this series of effects that began from this volcano.
Okay. That's the theory.
That's the theory. The other ones are relatively similar to this. The next one is a drought, and so it's a similar concept that there was some sort of drought somewhere in the world.
Sense there was sea people, so there's enough water.
Yeah, they had. If there was no ocean, then where are they coming from?
Yeah.
The ocean sank, and then the people that lived under there were like, whoa, there's a world up here.
So you're saying there are people who live under the ocean, and the water just slowly went down, and all of a sudden, their heads were just out of the water. And they were like, y'all see this? You see, like, they got chariots and stuff. We know how to say the word chariot. We knew what that is, though. We're very familiar with the world. wow, the water's down to our shoulders, right? And they kind of get a little worried because they're like trying to breathe. Right? And they're like, did a volcano cause this?
They're like, it's so much easier to breathe outside the water.
It's probably like creepy for that month where the water's still going down and it's just at their eyes.
They're like, what's happening, guys? Can you imagine if that happened with air? Like
what are you talking about?
If the atmosphere just sank.
And all of a sudden we're just in space?
Yeah, it's just our eyes are outside the atmosphere. That'd be sketchy.
Every time you drop something, it burns up. Yeah, you're eating, you drop something off your fork and you're just creating comets. Dog treats are a thing of the past.
Yeah, we can't toss those no more.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't jump either. Don't jump.
Yeah,
You'll get taken away.
Parents who throw their babies in the air. Oh, no. Yep. That baby belongs to space now. That's the spaces, baby.
That's the stars, baby.
Hey, thank you again for listening to this episode. Making sure that you don't miss one in the future, go ahead and subscribe to this podcast, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You'll get an alert when we drop a new episode. And if you want more, if you want something a week early, you want to be part of our Discord, more access to us as creators, you can support this show on Patreon. It helps us go a long way. Nothing that we're doing is possible without our Patreon supporters. If you want more information about that, please text TILLN to 66866. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, so the drought's a similar theory. There was some drought somewhere far away, and then everybody got hungry, and then it just kind of causes chain reaction. Another one is iron. So there's this cycle where the plankton eat the iron.
Stop.
No, so the idea is that there was some other nation somewhere that discovered iron.
Okay.
And they started making iron weapons, and it gave them an edge, and then they were able to become the sea peoples and go kill everybody.
So you're hung up on the numbers of that battle.
I am. And I'm hung up on the fact that if this is true,
great,
there should be an empire.
Let's go ahead and skip to the weird theories.
There's not any weird theories. Well, there are some people who think the sea peoples are aliens.
Yeah. I was going time travel.
Ooh, that's a cool theory.
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
Let's play about it. All right, here we go. 50 years before that, a dad throws his baby in the air, right? The baby floats away. 50 years later, it's very angry about the changes that have been made to Earth, and it's like I'm an atmosphere.
The baby is?
Yeah, well, it's no longer a baby; it's a grown man.
Yeah.
Who was grown into an atmosphere villain, right? So he returns.
Yeah. Got superpowers from growing up.
Oh,
in
obviously.
Space.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking to defeat the high number of people, got to have like cannons and guns and stuff.
Yeah. So you probably are from the future if you were able to do that.
Dude, you know how you and I could single-handedly win the Civil War if we went back in time with current weapons? Like you and me?
That would be a pretty fun movie.
Yeah, which side would you try? Which side would you fight for, Tim? I'd fight for the right one.
Yeah, which one's the right one?
I was hoping I was trying to trap you in that.
I know you were.
That's pretty funny.
So the idea is that there was some technological edge that some nation got, and they went and conquered everybody. But I think that's pretty unlikely because there was no empire that rose up after this. It was just vacant,
Okay.
So I think it's unlikely. The next one is kind of similar. They call it changes in warfare.
Yeah, why would they just... Yeah, I guess. Why would they just fight them and leave?
Yeah, that's very peculiar.
It's like mugging somebody but not taking their wallet.
Yeah. And there's stuff that's missing.
Well, I mean, I guess, but if they're greater, if they're more advanced, right, and they come and attack this land, and they realize, oh, we already have this.
Your stuff's not that great.
Yeah.
Maybe, I guess.
That's like when someone broke into my van, right, and they rummaged through all my merchandise and didn't steal a single thing. You know, like they broke my window out, looked at my shirts, my CDs, and they were like, no, I don't need any of this.
Nah. Bummer.
Unless there is that guy who broke into my van and he's now just a fan. But he's got that CD in his car.
He just saw your van and was like, oh, sweet. I love that guy.
No, my van used to say tour dates on it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think they broke in hoping to find things of value. And instead, they found my merchandise, which is of no value.
Yeah. That's fair.
And you can purchase on jaronmyers.com /van merch.
Van merch.
Yeah, that's why I think maybe they went and they were like, this isn't worth it though.
Maybe, but you would still think they would take the land.
That's true, I guess.
I mean, it's just strange. And what's even more strange is nobody rebuilt. I mean, they had to all die or they ran. There are new villages that popped up on the top of mountains. So these people were very scared of the sea peoples. They're like, they can't climb hills. Go up the hill. Another theory is changes in warfare. And so there's an idea that kind of similar to the Civil War, where, was it the Civil War or was it the War on Terror?
I knew you were going to say it, but it still got me just as good. Was it the Civil War or was that?
No, where warfare changed, where it wasn't the lines of people just shooting at each other, and then it was actual like combat, where you were.
No, they still did that in the War on Terror.
That's where it changed.
We had the drummers on the front line.
So.
Do you remember, like, not do you remember, do you realize, like, that was somebody died playing the flute in the Civil War? You know, like, that's not a hero. You're not a hero, you know? You're not a hero. The piccolo? Come on, dude. You know, you're not a hero.
There was probably
there's somebody who's like, my great-great-grandfather. My great-grandfather.
He was the fluter.
You know, he played the piccolo. He was, you know, imagine that though. Imagine you were looking up your family history and your great-grandfather played the piccolo in the Civil War.
Yeah. I like to picture that the piccolo guy,
and
the piccolo guy got shot, and then someone on the other side of the line was like, the piccolo's down, and he ran across really valiantly to pick it up and then keep playing because someone had to do it. And then he got shot.
Yeah. If someone stops playing the piccolo, the sea people will show up. It's the only way to keep them underwater is to, you know.
They pop up and they're like, is that Piccolo?
Dude, Piccolo guy didn't even mean to be in the Civil War. He's just an ice cream man, right? He's just out there. He's got his little satchel of melted ice cream. They couldn't carry it. They didn't have the technology back then, right? And he's just out there like, ice cream, you know? And anyway, no, but for, you know, it's definitely going to be one of those lifted truck guys who's got like the Punisher logo on the back of his truck. He's like, my grandfather has fought for this war. He fought for this war, and his grandfather fought in the Civil War.
It's like, you know, your grandfather played the piccolo. Yeah.
He's like, yeah. What about it?
What about it?
He just puts his together.
He's on the highway. He's getting in road rage, and he gets out of the car. He's like, you're gonna regret this. And he like gets out.
You say you're sorry now.
Say it. I'm not afraid to use it. Don't make me use it.
And he's ripped. Like, he's buff, dude. He's like a really buff, bald, scary looking guy.
He's got a Punisher tat on his face.
Wow.
I don't
know. Some of these jokes are good, and some of them are just real, real bad. So we got highs and piccolos. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
This episode sucks.
So there was also an earthquake storm.
Earthquake storm? What? There was also an earthquake storm.
Apparently a real thing.
Apparently the earth shakes.
Yeah. What happens is, I guess, and it makes sense if you think about it. Sometimes there's an earthquake, and then there's a lot of them for a while, because I guess like the plates are moving, and then
like
they never figure it out in one
aftershocks
earthquake.
and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, if a plate's moving, one quake isn't enough to solve whatever they're trying to figure out.
I do know a lot about plates.
Yeah. This is a good plate.
This is
a really good plate.
a good plate.
Can I take a bite out of that plate? That's a good plate you got right there. If the Earth is shifting, most likely one earthquake isn't enough for it to figure out where it's trying to go. And so it needs some more earthquakes to get where it's going.
Sure.
And so there's occasionally these earthquake storms where in a specific region, there'll be just a lot of earthquakes for a while until the earth gets sorted out a little bit.
And so all the theories involve, these are things that led to them being destroyed by an enemy.
Basically,
so it's very clear they were destroyed by an enemy.
I don't know if it was they were destroyed by the enemy. I think what we see is we know there was a lot of nations that got attacked by somebody.
Okay.
We don't know who or where they came from, but we know they all talked about the sea people.
Mm-hmm.
These, the thing is, it doesn't seem like that's the only part of the story.
Right. So we're saying like this is all
there's
stuff
an unknown cause.
You just take a long way to say what I just said, though, is that we are confirmed that they were attacked by somebody.
Yeah, but it's not.
But
it's
we're
not
not
that
saying
was,
that the attack was what was collapsing it.
Yeah.
We're saying that these are all the theories of other factors.
Yeah.
Plus the attack.
Yeah.
That would have led to this collapse of an 1,800-year-old civilization.
That was pretty advanced and stable.
Okay.
And it happened in 50 years.
I mean, you are one generation away from total collapse is something that, I don't know. That's what a lot of Republicans say. You're one generation away from...
Probably get it from this.
Yeah. My grandfather played the piccolo.
But, and so the earthquake storm, same thing, started it. So basically what we're getting is there's a lot of different little things that could have been the root cause.
Right.
Sent things down a road that caused a greater collapse. And that's kind of where historians sit now, is they think it was kind of this greater systems collapse is the phrase that they use, where the society was built on the systems of trade and agriculture.
Something happened. They were overwhelmed.
Yeah.
The system did not run properly.
Yeah.
Supply chain was broken.
Exactly. And so because trade was hampered, because there was the famine, they got opened up to disease and things like that they weren't before, and they got opened up to the possibility of being raided by these, whatever the sea peoples were. In 50 years, it brought the known world for those people
to its knees.
And what's very crazy is it didn't bounce back for 500 years. This whole region was just kind of left in ruin for 500 years. And then the Greek civilization came up out of it.
And they were like, let's invest in this property. The Greeks saw it as a wonderful investment opportunity. Like, this is where we'll make our yogurt.
It took them years to get to the point where they were even comparable to what was there before. And so a lot of historians, they look to the mythology and even a lot of the religious texts from that era after the collapse. And they like even the story of Atlantis. A lot of historians will say Atlantis is talking about the world before the Bronze Age collapse. And maybe there was an actual city called Atlantis, or maybe it was just this distant memory that was passed down through generations of people saying like the world was a much better place before. Everything just kind of fell apart.
They never finished their sentence. Like, there's a much better place before. Before what, Grandpa? Before what, Grandpa? It sounds like you just whispered to me. The next time you do that, I'll whisper back. Dude, Grandpa's lost his mind, dude.
And so it's it's strange because
it's weird.
It's strange because this was a time where we had this society that had written word, that had a good history, that kept track of everything.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it just disappeared, and there's this window in history where there was basically nothing. And we don't have a lot of record of what happened in there. And then all of a sudden Greece rises up. And what's interesting is even in the collapse for those nations that survived, Egypt, it seems like just made a bunch of crap up. Like they've got all this stuff about how Ramses defeated the Sea Peoples and pushed them back and all this stuff. And it doesn't seem like that's necessarily true. It just seems like they just kind of got lucky and were on the tail end of this by the time the Sea People showed up. Or if I don't know. It just doesn't seem like they're telling the truth about the scenario.
You think ancient Egypt, deep state ancient Egypt, is lying about what happened?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so these nations, they went on, and Egypt obviously stuck around and became a big deal. Assyria stuck around and became a big deal. But this window was where Israel popped up, and out of the Levant, they ended up over there, and they made their nation, and the rest is in the Bible.
Yeah. If you're curious about that one, you can pick it up.
You can pick it up.
Any hotel room.
So yeah, this is, I don't know. It's the Bronze Age collapse. It just kind of fell apart.
Yeah, a lot like the end of this episode, apparently. Jeez.
Yeah, apparently. It wasn't, there's no real clear reason. Or most likely aliens.
Most likely, probably. Well, what they say. Anyway, is that the end?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, fell apart. Wow. Well, I forgot to tell you, I saw almost a fight at a red light the other day.
Yeah.
Somebody honked one of those big trucks, right? He gets out, he's like, the other person,
oh gosh,
pulled out a fiddle. Isn't that wild?
Things I Learned Last Night is a production of Space Tim Media. Produced by Christian Taylor, audio by Alex Garnett, video by Connor Betts, our graphics and our logo by Caleb Goldberg, and our social media is run by Caleb Walker. Our hosts are Jaron Myers and Tim Stone. Follow us on your favorite social media platform at TILLN Podcast. That's TILLN Podcast. Remember to tell all your friends about us, and we'll see you next Tuesday for another episode of Things I Learned Last Night.